Peggy and I were in Asheville a few weeks ago at a really nice Chinese restaurant. We're sitting there with our appetizers and our plum wine. The server, I'm sorry, I'm so 20th century. The server comes out with a great big tureen with a lid on it and sets it down between us. And we're continuing to work on our appetizers and chatting, and suddenly the lid opens up about an inch, and these two little beady eyes looked out at us, and the lid clanked shut. And we waited, and about 30 seconds later, it happened again. So we called the server over and said, let's see if this happens. Sure enough, the lid opened up. These two little eyes, black, peered out, and the lid closed. The server looked at his order list and said, "Oh no, I know what happened. You ordered the chicken surprise and they sent out Peking duck." Another one of my favorite stories is about Quasimodo, the hero, if there is such a thing in that particular case, of the Hunchback of Notre Dame. In the book, as well in the movie, Quasimodo dies, starves to death on the grave of his beloved Esmeralda. That's not what happened in the book Victor Hugo wrote. His editor made him change it. Wanted the pathos. In the original story, as told by Hugo, after Esmeralda is executed, Quasimodo lives on, ringing the bells 7 days a week in the Notre Dame Cathedral. Finally, the arthritis starts to get to him, and he decides he needs to retire. He puts an ad in the Paris Match. Apprentice bell ringer wanted. Apply Quasimodo, Notre Dame Cathedral. A couple days later, there's a thud at the door. It's not a knock, it's a thud. Quasimodo opens the door, and here's a lanky, good-looking French guy who has no arms. He was apparently born that way. He introduces himself and says, "I am Jacques. I am here to apply for the bell ringer job." Quasimodo said, "What the hell are you talking about? You can't do that. You don't have any arms to pull the ropes." "Let me show you." They go in where the ropes hang down from the belfry. Jacques grabs the rope in his teeth, goes like this, and of course nothing happened. Those clappers weigh 300 pounds each on the bigger bells. Quasimodo says, "See, I told you it's not going to work." Jacques said, "Let us go up there. I can show you I can ring the bells." Curious, Quasimodo says, "Okay," and up they go. 267 steps on a circular staircase all the way to the belfry. Jacques walks over to the biggest bell, whams his face into it. Not a sound. Nothing. Nada. Quasimodo says, "Monsieur, you're going to hurt yourself. You cannot do that." "Quasimodo, I need this job. If I do not get this job, my family will starve in the streets. Let me show you." He takes a running leap to go face first into the bell, and he misses. All the way down to the pavement, narrowly missing a little schoolgirl named Madeline. But that's the subject of another story. Quasimodo goes down the circular staircase, 267 steps. There's a couple of gendarmes standing over the crumpled body. "He jumped out right in front of me. It was an accident," says Quasimodo. The gendarme looked up and said, "Do you know this man?" He says, "Well, his face doesn't quite ring a bell." Then, 3 or 4 days later, there's another thud at the door. It's Jean. Jean is Jacques' brother. Jean is similarly afflicted. And to make a long story short, which is unaccustomed as I am to making long stories short, he goes out of the bell tower to his death. Quasimodo goes running down and said, "It happened again." And the gendarme looks up and said, "Do you know this one?" He said, "No, but he's a dead ringer for his brother." My father, whom everybody knew as Rem, graduated from University of Illinois almost 100 years ago, believe it or not. He was a journalism major. He went to work for the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. And while there, he was getting his feet wet. The editor of the paper said, "Rem, just wander around the city looking for human interest stories. I know a guy who's inquisitive as you will find a lot of them." Rem is walking around and he sees this sign, Olaf Olafsson's Chinese Laundry. Well, there has to be a story behind this. And if there's not, I'll make one up. Actually, I think my old man made this one up, but I'm not sure. He told it to me. Rem goes in, and there's a short, sort of bowed and not very young Chinese guy who's running the laundry. And Rem says, "Who is Olaf Olafsson?" "Well, I am. You saw the sign, Olaf Olafsson's Chinese Laundry. That's me." And Rem blinked and said, "Well, how did you get your name?" I said, "To tell you the truth, I'm not sure. We came into the U.S. at Ellis Island. There's a great big long line of people trying to get into the country. In front of me, huge blonde guy, hair down to his shoulders, blonde beard down to hair. The clerk said, 'What's your name?' And the fellow said, 'Olaf Olafsson.' And they filled out a bunch of papers, and Olaf Olafsson went away. And I walked up, and the clerk said, 'What's your name?' And I said, 'Sam Ting.'" Isaac Walton was the fisherman's fisherman. He wrote The Complete Angler. It was a remarkable development in sports literature. He created all kinds of fishing lures. One of the most interesting was from a chess set that his son had given him. The chess set, the biggest piece was about this big. The pawns were about this big. They were all made out of very shiny metal, gold and silver. Isaac got to looking at them and said, "You know, they're shiny. Fish like shiny stuff." So he started experimenting, putting hooks on them and figuring out ways to cast them and where the best point was for the line to attach to the chess piece, and discovered that the pawns, absolutely the best thing for catching fish, which led Walt Disney to that wonderful song, "When you fish, a pawn's a star."